West Midlands force, to the leader of Birmingham City Council, and to all those people who from that meeting then went out and spoke to their communities and appealed for calm. And I think the scenes we all saw on our television screens last night of communities coming together in Birmingham to try and stop violence taking place was a model of how these things should be done.
Mr. David Winnick.
What justification can there be in the West Midlands, bearing in mind what the Prime Minister has just said, for very experienced police officers who've served 30 years or more being forced to retire against their wishes because of the cuts? And isn't it the case, well, where, Mr. Speaker, there is no adequate police presence, as been the case once or twice, unfortunately, during the last few days, then it's the mob that takes over?
I think the Honourable Gentleman is entirely right. When I was in Wolverhampton yesterday, what I heard was that the number of police officers was something like doubling overnight compared with the previous night. And I suspect the same was happening in Walsall, West Bromwich and other parts of the West Midlands. The fact is that one of the lessons we need to learn is the ability to surge the number of police officers very rapidly into our communities when there are problems arising like this. But let me just say again, the police do a difficult and dangerous job on our behalf. They learn from experience. They're hugely experienced in our country of dealing with difficult situations. They don't always get it right. We must praise them when they get it right. And we must, I think, here say that some of the tactics need to change, but not try and substitute our own judgment for theirs. That wouldn't be a sensible approach.
Mr. Nick Dubois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents and I witnessed some shocking events in Enfield on Sunday and Monday. But what was particularly shocking was the age of a number of the culprits that were in the incidents that night. Would the Prime Minister assure me that he could ask the police authorities to work with the education authorities in an attempt to identify many of these secondary school children who were out there causing these crimes?
I certainly think that is a sensible suggestion, but I think over and above that, we have to recognise that the responsibility for the fact some of these children, and I use the word children advisedly, are out on the streets, rests with their parents. What we do need to have is a sense that parents are going to take more responsibility.
Not everyone else just stands up randomly.
Yeah, that's what they do. They have something to
point out this sort of behaviour.
No, but I mean everybody else just randomly stands up after someone's spoken at see.
It's part of Parliament protocol.
That these criminals who looted, stole, rioted, caused intolerable damage to the people who are the victims of this must be dealt with by the police and by the justice system. What I want to ask the Prime Minister is, do we regard these people, however abject their acts, as irreclaimable to society at great cost to the police, to the justice system and to the prison system? Or will we have positive policies to try, if at all possible, to reclaim them for society?
Prime Minister.
I agree with the Right Honourable Gentleman. We must never write people off, however bad they are. We must try and build a stronger society where you can actually turn people's lives around. But I think one of the lessons from this is too many people have been left for too long, and we need much earlier intervention. This is something where members on all sides of the House have spoken about. Much earlier intervention, so when we see children going wrong, we intervene earlier rather than leaving them to fall out of school and lapse into a life of criminality.
Nadine Dorries.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. If these riots had broken out in any city or town in Australia or America, the police would have had at their instant disposal water cannon, plastic bullets and tear gas. Mr. Speaker, across the UK, British people watched on television while police were instructed to stand back, while shops were looted, homes were torched and cars were set on fire. Does the Prime Minister really believe that 24 hours notice of the use of water cannon is enough? And is it not that this is not about police numbers, but about police being given the tools to do the job?
Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, let me say to the Honourable Lady is that the police do have access to baton rounds, and they are able to make that decision to use them, and in London they came quite close to making that decision. That must be an operational decision for the police. On the issue of water cannon, the very strong advice from the police is that because on the whole they weren't dealing with very large crowds, but very mobile crowds of people who are intent on criminal behaviour, water cannon wouldn't have been appropriate in these circumstances. That is the police view. The point I have made is that we should be ready for every possible contingency in the future. So we should know how we would answer future questions, which is why they are now
Thursday
at 24 hours' notice. But I don't agree with her about this, which is, I think, the greatest possible deterrent to the sort of lawlessness we saw is for people to know that if they do that looting, they do that violence, they'll be pulled out of that crowd, arrested immediately, and be in front of a court that night. That is the answer. And the key to that is more police on the street so they are able to be more robust in the way that they intervene.
Mr. Keith Baz.
Can I welcome all the steps taken by the Prime Minister since the start of these disorders and join with him and others in condemning the criminality and also praising the police. He was out on the streets of London yesterday. The key issue was police visibility. Is he saying that if a police force has to dip into their contingencies in order to pay for what has been going on over the last few days, that the government will reimburse all this money?
Well, first of all, can I thank the right honourable gentleman for what he has said and for the work that I know his committee will be doing in the coming weeks. The fact is the Treasury is standing ready to assist police forces. Clearly the bill for the Metropolitan Police Force for these last few days is going to be large, and if they continue to deploy in these numbers, it will get larger and the Treasury will stand behind that.
Mr. Simon Hughes.
Mr. Speaker, those of us in the communities affected give our thanks to the police and the emergency services, but are conscious that if the best deterrent is being caught, the police at the moment have a minority of their officers trained, able to use riot headgear and riot equipment. Can he look with the Home Secretary at that being reversed so that most police officers have that as the presumption so they can act and intervene? And will he make sure the full force of the law doesn't just go on the hardened 50 per community, the serial criminals, but the adults with children who are also going into the shops and nicking stuff, not just the children to whom they're meant to be setting an example?
On the honourable gentleman's first point, yes, of course, there will be a proper review in terms of what is the right balance between riot police and normal borough policing so that we meet these sorts of emergencies better in future. Of course that will happen. In terms of prosecuting the guilty, the police should go after everybody. They've got the CCTV images. There are people all over the country ringing up and explaining their neighbour has just acquired a new 42-inch plasma screen. I'd encourage even more people to do that and for as many people to be nicked as possible.
This is Louise Elman.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Liverpool are united in their absolute condemnation of the criminal acts that wreaked so much havoc and caused so much fear in parts of Liverpool over the last few days. But what specific arrangements has the Prime Minister made to enable the city and indeed others who have suffered similarly to be able to be assisted in a swift recovery?
I pay tribute to the Honourable Lady for speaking on behalf of Liverpool, which too suffered in terms of this violent disorder. Liverpool will be able to apply not only through the Bellwyn scheme that exists, but also through this new special scheme that doesn't have a threshold you need to cross in order to claim payments under it. Also, the Riot Damages Act is effectively unlimited in the claims that you can make, and as I've said, the Home Office will stand behind police forces. So there's a series of measures, and there will be written statements in the House today so she can see full details and share them with her council leader.
Mr. Andrew Rosindell.
I know that the Prime Minister will agree with me that we in Britain still have the best police force in the world. However, will he agree with me that it's time that the police were refocused back to being crime fighters instead of social workers?
I think the police have the clearest possible message that we want them to be a police force, we want them to be focused on crime, we don't want them fighting paper behind their desk, and I think they've had a very clear message from the whole country this week that people want visible policing, but they want very robust policing too.
Mr. David Miliband.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will be as pleased as I am that there has been no rioting or looting in South Shields. He has rightly praised the independence, the professionalism of the Chief Constables. Why, therefore, does he want to get rid of them all and make them stand for election?
We're not proposing to make Chief Constables stand for election. What we are proposing is to have police commissioners stand for election, replacing police authorities. And the point I would make is this, that actually in recent days, I think the argument that yes, you have independent police chief constables, yes, they have to be responsible for their judgments, but it's important they are accountable politically, and there is a discussion that can take place between politicians and between police chiefs, is a thoroughly good one.
Angie Bray.
Speaker, Ealing Town Centre was badly smashed up on Monday night. A man is critically ill in hospital, having been attacked by a Yob when he tried to put out a fire in a litter bin. People are pretty devastated. Morale was slightly lifted when we heard the Prime Minister say that those big enough to take part in the protest are big enough to take the consequences. Can the Prime Minister assure my constituents that those who are found guilty of being caught up in this mayhem will feel the full force of the law, including prison sentences?
Yes, I can give her that assurance. I want to thank her for the briefing that she gave me of what had been happening in Ealing, particularly on Monday night. I can give her that assurance. I mean, the sentencing must be a matter for the courts, but the Sentencing Guidelines Council is clear that people taking part in violent disorder should expect to go to prison.
Dr. Stella Creasy.
Can I invite the Prime Minister to join with me and the people of Walthamstow, not only in putting on the record our gratitude to the police who've worked so hard to restore the calm to our streets, but also the outreach and community workers who have been out every single night talking to people to reduce the tension and restore order on our streets in partnership with the police. And can I invite him to meet with those people so that he can understand that it is not a tiresome debate to talk about resourcing that work, but we must learn from their experience in restoring order not just in these next few days, but every day in our communities, across the country.
Certainly we're happy to meet with the Honourable Lady, and the point she makes that reclaiming the streets is not just an issue for the police, but it's an issue for everybody, I think is absolutely right, and we've seen fantastic examples of that right across our country. The point I was trying to make about resources is that I hope that we can have of course resources will be debated in the debate that follows later, but I hope also we can have a debate about some of the culture, about some of the upbringing, about some of the parenting, about some of the deeper points that lie behind these problems.
David T.C. Davis.
Mr. Speaker, frontline officers were telling me last night that they have been afraid to use a measure of physical force because of concerns about criticisms by members of Parliament, which they've actually seen before. So when the Prime Minister, I welcome this, says we will be robust and do whatever it takes, can he assure us that members of this House will support the police if they have to strike people with batons or kettle them in, because force has to be met with greater force?
I know the Honourable Gentleman speaks with great expertise because he serves as a special constable himself. And the point is this, that people do want robust policing. Of course the police have to be sensitive to things that have happened in the past. And sometimes the pendulum can swing too far one way and then too far the other way. But I'm sure the message has been received loud and clear that when there's this sort of violent criminal behaviour, people want a very robust response.
Heidi Alexander.
Speaker, the Prime Minister has talked about the role played by gangs and technology in the disorder that has taken place over the last week. Does he share my concern about the popularity and accessibility of internet footage glorifying gangs and knives? And what will he do to ensure that these despicable videos are taken down?
I think the Honourable Lady speaks very powerfully for Lewisham, for her constituency, but also on this issue, where frankly everyone has responsibilities, not just members of Parliament, police, parents, but also media companies and social media companies who are displaying these images, and all of them should think about their responsibilities and taking down those images. And that's why the Home Secretary is going to have meetings with those organisations to see what more can be done.
Mr. Gavin Barr.